Hello and welcome to the Kevin Mannix Report. I'm your host for this program, Kevin Mannix from Salem, and we're glad to have you with us as we try to gain some more insight into public officials and public issues as they relate to our state and our municipalities throughout the state. Our guest today is a gentleman who has been involved heavily for many years in the criminal justice system and will soon become a judge. Our guest is the Polk County District Attorney, Fred Avery. Welcome.
Thank you, Kevin.
One of the things we try to do on this show is to get a little background information on our guests, but since I already teased the audience mentioning the judgeship, perhaps I can bring that out in the open right away. Can you tell us about what's going to happen in January?
Well, yes. Last year, the legislature took note of the fact that Polk County last was awarded a new judgeship in 1966. That was our second judgeship, and we still sit at 2. So the legislature created a third circuit court judicial position in Polk County to take effect in January of 1999. They specified that would be chosen by election in 1998. I went ahead and filed for that, and I wound up, fortunately for me, being the only person to file for that. So in May, it was a rather easy election. I was the only person on the ballot, and of course won that. So I'm now a lame duck in my current office, serving out the remainder of this year, and January 4th I will be sworn in as Polk County's third circuit court judge.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I should mention too that the real reason you were the only candidate is that no other attorney in Polk County dared run against you.
I don't know if that's true or not.
Well, usually there are contested races if one of the candidates is perceived as weak. At least I can say that, maybe you can't. But let's go back a little ways here now and talk about Fred Avery in terms of your career and your life. Where do you hail from?
Well, I was a Navy brat as a child. My dad was career Navy, served 20 years. And so I was actually born in Honolulu when he was stationed there. Early years lived all over, wherever there was a Navy base, San Diego, Jacksonville, Florida, Alameda. And then when I was about 6, he finished his 20 years and retired, and we settled in the East Bay area of California. And pretty much grew up there, went to college, graduated from the University of California at Davis, near Sacramento in 1972, and then decided to go to law school and wound up here in Salem at Willamette University. I'd never really been in Oregon before, been through Oregon, but never spent much time here. And in the time I was going to law school, just basically fell in love with the Salem area and the Willamette Valley in Oregon and decided to stay.
Well, you know, Willamette University is a great recruiter for us of good people. They bring all kinds of fine students here, and then some of them stay.
It's a terrific school.
Well, you're married. Your wife's name is Sally.
Right.
And how long have you been married?
We, in May, crossed the 25-year line.
And she's a lawyer, too. Can you tell us a little about how you two came to know each other? Or?
Yes. We wound up in the same dormitory at University of California, and knew each other since then. Basically, we're best friends. And then we both shared the interest and desire to go to law school, and just wound up getting closer that way. So wound up getting married after college, and went to law school sort of together. She wound up, for one reason or another, being a year behind me in law school. So she followed me through Willamette. We were head residents at one of the dormitories there, is how we supported ourselves through that time when both of us were paying tuition. And so I wound up graduating in 1976 and she in 1977.
So she headed off into a career in law, and you did too. Were you in similar careers at the time, or can you tell us about that?
Well, initially very similar. When I came out, I worked briefly for a job down in Benton County, an office in Philomath. Didn't care for that and wanted to have my own practice. And so in 1977, I opened my own office in Dallas, and then when she graduated, she came in with me. And we had a little mom-and-pop storefront law office for 7 or 8 years in Dallas, and really had some good times.
That, I would think, would sort of be the front lines of law practice, is running that kind of a firm.
It was a real experience. We didn't get rich, but we had some great times working together. Some marriages couldn't do it, some could, but we had a great time.
Now, Sally has worked as the state public defender handling the criminal appeals for indigent defendants, running that office for years, and now she's actually working as a deputy DA in Polk County.
Right. Yeah, we worked together in a practice until 1984, and then she had worked in law school as a law clerk for the state public defender's office, and in 1984 we decided it was time for a professional change. She went into the state public defender's office as a deputy. I wound up going into the district attorney's office as a deputy in Polk County. And then a few years later, we both wound up heading our respective offices. So I became district attorney in 1987. She became the state public defender, I think, in 1988 or 89.
See, the mental image I have of both of you is Sally as a state public defender, because when I was a representative, I dealt with her in that capacity, and then my image of you is district attorney from Polk County for goodness knows how long, because I started legislating in 1989, and you came in on criminal justice issues. Now, you are still district attorney, and that will continue until you're sworn in as judge in January?
That's correct.
Can you give the viewers an idea of what the job of district attorney is really all about? You know, they hear about district attorneys, they sort of figure, well, he's the guy in charge of the office that prosecutes criminals, but they probably don't understand the interrelationship with the state or whatever. At least many of them might not, and perhaps you could help enlighten us.
Well, of course, the biggest part of the job is what you allude to and what most people think of, and mine is the office in Polk County that prosecutes criminals. And that's far and away the biggest part of my job. We also have a division in the office that collects child support, and we're obliged to do that under state and federal law, and it's a very important job. We collect well over $1 million a year in Polk County for people, mostly mothers, who oftentimes wouldn't otherwise be getting child support, and that's an important part of the job. There's a million smaller parts of the job. We are in charge of investigating all deaths in the county that come within a statutory classification that winds up being most deaths. Basically anything that isn't as a result of disease with a doctor in attendance has to be investigated by the district attorney. So homicides, suicides, accidents, unexplained natural deaths are all ours. We're in charge of the state public records law enforcement for the county. So if Kevin Mannix or any other citizen wanted a record from Polk County or the city of Dallas or a school district, and they refused to give it to you, you would apply to me for enforcement, and we do that. And many other small jobs that come within the title of district attorney. Our relationship with the state is a bit unique. The district attorney's office is a department within the county. All of the employees of the district attorney's office are county employees. Their pay is set by the county. I, however, am a state employee, and am elected by the people, employed by the state of Oregon, to run a county department. So that's a bit unusual. All of my salary and benefits come from the state. In some places that works. I think in most places that works. In Polk County, for the last 10 years or so, it has worked very well.
There would be some misunderstanding sometimes among folks in terms of the district attorney as opposed to some other offices. For instance, larger cities may have a city attorney. In fact, smaller cities might actually have a private attorney who's part-time on contract as the city attorney. And then counties will usually have county counsel, and again, a larger county would have someone on salary as county counsel. Those are the attorneys who advise the city government or the county government about their day-to-day operations and handle their civil affairs. but the district attorney, as in effect the state's attorney for that county, runs a county department. That department is dedicated to the purposes you talked about, particularly prosecution of criminals. And you don't end up representing the county or the city in their legal actions and that kind of thing.
Not in my county. In some of the smaller counties, the district attorney is also the county counsel and advises the Board of Commissioners on legal issues. Probably the one county over here I can think of that still does that is Lynn County, where Jason Carlisle is both the district attorney and the county counsel.
And would that be because of the low population, low base of government, it's just more efficient to have the DA serve that role also?
I think in the smaller counties that's true. In Lynn County, it's just, again, a unique local situation where it works for them. Frankly, I'm thankful that one of my jobs does not include advising the Board of Commissioners. I'm very happy with the role of district attorney as public prosecutor, and to leave that to David Doyle as our county counsel, and does a very good job of it.
Now, over the years, and I know as a newly elected judge, you have to be careful about being an advocate on issues, but I'm just talking historically about the kinds of issues that have confronted district attorneys. You had appeared before the legislature. You were president of the Oregon District Attorneys Association. Can you give us some idea of the kinds of issues that have arisen in regard to the prosecutors' offices around the state in the last few years?
No, we've had many issues, many battles, as you know, some of them in your committees, where the district attorneys have worked. One of the great joys and great burdens of being a Polk County District Attorney is you're close to Salem, and so you wind up shouldering a lot of the duties before the legislature. Dale Penn here in Marion County, even more so, really carries the load for district attorneys here, but I got to do a lot of that too. Too many issues to count. I think back to the protection of children, the progress that's been made in the last 8-10 years on that, the crime of murder by abuse that was adopted by the legislature in, I think, in 89 or 91, I don't remember. And then I think that has been improved over the last few years as we've gone on. Generally the laws regarding the prosecution of child abuse, child sexual abuse, have greatly improved, I think through the efforts of a lot of people, including yourself and other members of the legislature and the district attorneys and other law enforcement officials that push that.
One of the issues that seems to be confronting prosecutors today is a resource issue. Not that that isn't always an issue, but the counties are particularly strapped for funds these days, relatively speaking, because of property tax limitations, whereas the state government is relatively flush because the income tax is doing very nicely thanks to a very solid economy. I know you, again, can't talk about policy issues for the future and that sort of thing, but historically, what kind of impact does that have? Does that affect the decisions you make about prosecution, decisions about investigation, prioritization?
It gets into something that's going to be a very controversial and important issue, I think, in 1999 and beyond that. And that is who should bear the financial cost of the office of public prosecutor. As I pointed out earlier, currently my salary and benefits are all paid by the state. All the county provides me with is an office and phones and that sort of thing. All other expenses are covered by the county. There is some very small reimbursement to the counties from the state for deputy district attorneys. I think it amounts to $3,000 or $4,000 per lawyer in the office for the first 3. And so you can imagine that doesn't have much of an impact on even my county, and when you get into the bigger counties, even less. Years ago, the state had pretty much made a promise to counties that it would cover half the cost of that the county had to bear for the prosecution of state offenses. And every year as the state budget would come up short, other priorities would press, that promise of half has dwindled until now. It's, as I say, just a relatively insignificant amount that the state offers. In 1997, the Association of Oregon Counties led a charge to try to get the state to assume more of the burden of financing the district attorney's office and other state mandates that are placed on the county. The result of that was Senate Bill 6 and interim studies. The Attorney General is leading a work group on Senate Bill 6 to try to come to some solution as to how much of the burden, financial burden, the state should bear. And I say that's controversial. With money goes control. Currently, as the district attorney of Polk County, although my salary comes from the state, the funding for my office comes from the county, which means prosecution decisions, policy decisions, what is going to be prosecuted and how it's going to be prosecuted, all those decisions are made locally. And that's something between me and my commissioners. In Polk County, I'm fortunate because we have a very supportive population base. We have extremely supportive commissioners and county officials who believe it's important to prosecute criminals to the maximum. And that's what we have done as long as I've been district attorney. If financial control of my office goes to the state, if the state's paying the bills, then the policies for the Polk County District Attorney are eventually going to be set by someone in Salem and not someone in Dallas. So it would be a blessing to us. If the state took over, it would free up county resources. It would, that would be good. But there is no free lunch and there is no free funding.
It would seem to me that there could be some formula approach that's taken where you could find a middle road where the control would not necessarily flow from Salem. The legislature has managed to come up with something in terms of school funding, which tends to move in that direction, where school boards still have a lot of leeway, even though 2/3 of the funding for public schools now come from the state legislature, not from local property taxes. I should say from the state income tax and from the lottery money, since it's actually money that originally came from the taxpayers and people playing lottery games. But 2/3 of the funding for schools comes through the state now, and yet the state, in effect, uses a formula to provide funding to the schools on a per-pupil basis, and there's some spin-offs on that, so that a great deal of local control has been maintained, although I have to mention quickly, with that large amount of state funding, an issue has arisen as to how much local control you allow if some school district is spinning off and spending a lot of money and, in effect, begging that the per-pupil allocation be increased. So that'll be a separate issue. But switching back to prosecutors, one solution that comes to mind might be for the state to have a formula as to a certain number of prosecutors positions that it will fully fund. And that at that point it can be partially based on population, also based on geography, that the county still has to provide the staffing for the office. So you do have a mixed budget, but where a substantial burden, which is the salaries and benefits for the prosecutors, might be paid by the state. It just comes to me off the top of my head. Is that one of the items of debate? Yeah,
certainly. And I certainly hope that the people working on this issue, the Attorney General, his work group, and of course the legislature, can come up with creative ideas like that one that will work. Of course, in my position, I'll be leaving office before any of this goes anywhere, but I'll be a very interested observer.
Well, we'll have to keep working on that. I'll pause for a moment and mention to our audience that you're with us on the Kevin Mannix Report. I am Senator Kevin Mannix from Salem. I'm your host for the program. Our guest today is a gentleman who is the Polk County District Attorney, Fred Avery. He is also Circuit Court Judge-elect for Polk County, and he will be joining the bench on January 4, 1999. So we'll pick up from there. We always like to let folks know where we are. I should also mention something else to the audience, so excuse me while I say something else to them. I should also mention that if you ever have any questions or concerns at any time, you should feel free to write to me And you can write to me at 2003 State Street, Salem, Oregon, 97301. And again, that's 2003 State Street, Salem, Oregon, 97301. You can also call, if you would like, 391-8031. That's in Salem, so it's 503-391-8031. Usually that phone has a recorded answer line, but feel free to leave a message on the line with your name and phone number, and we will get back to you. We always are happy to hear from you. Sorry to give you that interruption, but it's important to pass on some of that information.
Yes, it is.
Well, as you're shifting, the Code of Judicial Conduct does say that you're not supposed to become engaged in matters of which may come in front of you as a judge and matters of public political debate, but you're still allowed to provide what I'd call background information as to historical situations. Is that
Sure.
fair?
That's fair.
I'm curious as to whether or not you'd like to relate some of the key cases that have arisen over the last few years, whether it's positive or negative, some of the kinds of things you've had to deal with as district attorney in Polk County, to give folks an idea what the job is really all about.
Well, of course, the cases that make the news and that gather the most interest, of course, are the homicide cases. One of the great things about being Polk County District Attorney is that we're just about the right size. As you get into a bigger county, Multnomah County, Marion County, it's impossible for the district attorney to personally handle a lot of cases. A person handling an office of that size must be more of an administrator. In Polk County, I have 5 deputies. I can do my administrative duties and also carry a caseload. So in a county my size, I wind up handling most of the homicide cases. So those to me have been the most interesting, the one that has brought us the most public attention. We have the one going now that I can't really go into details on, the young man accused of shooting his parents. That has been the biggest media circus type event that I've ever seen happen in a small little Polk County and Dallas. It seemed like for a while we were the center of the world to look out and see all the satellite trucks. But we've had many other cases that have been of interest. I mentioned the murder by abuse statute. I had the opportunity to prosecute one of the very first cases under that law a few years ago, a case arising out of West Salem of a man who had abused his wife and his children for years until he wound up killing his 23-month-old baby by kicking her to death. So we wound up blazing a trail in this uncharted water of the murder by abuse statute. I should say that the problem with child abuse murders is very rarely can you prove that the parent intended to kill this child. And under traditional murder laws, you have to prove an intent to kill. What this guy intended to do is he intended to knock this kid around. And he certainly expected the kid to survive so he could knock it around again the next day. And prior to the adoption of the murder by abuse statute, that simply could not be prosecuted as a murder. It would have to be a manslaughter or some sort of reckless case. We had this arise very soon after the law went into effect, and had to make a lot of new law, and wound up successfully convicting this gentleman and getting him a very long prison sentence.
One of the things that the public sometimes may wonder about is prosecutors are not free to talk about their cases while they're pending trial. You can only give some very basic information. And the defense attorneys sometimes, if I may use the term, mouth off a lot more about the case, although they too are supposed to be limited in what they say. That's a comment by me. You don't have to get into that. But one of the prosecutor's basic jobs is to do justice. That is, to make sure that justice is ensured, and you are supposed to turn over any evidence you have, especially exculpatory evidence, that is evidence that will get off the defendant. The difference for the defense attorney is that the defense attorney is representing his client's interests zealously, making sure his constitutional rights are protected, but he has no obligation to give you evidence that he has which will incriminate him. Is that a fair statement of the balance as it exists right now?
That's a fair statement. The roles of the two lawyers are very different. I have fulfilled both roles in my career. I have defended an aggravated murder case to jury verdict, and I have prosecuted aggravated murder cases to jury verdict. And what you say is absolutely true. As the public prosecutor, it is not my job to convict anyone of anything. It is my job to do justice. And if justice happens to mean that someone is going to be convicted, then so be it. If justice is that someone should go free, then so be that too. Whereas, as you say, the defense lawyer's only job is to represent this client on this case and to use all of his skill and the law to try to either win the case or minimize the impact.
And the reason I bring this up is, for instance, with the O.J. Simpson case, which is the most well-known case nationally, in that criminal trial, the prosecutor, of course, had to provide all possible evidence to the defense. Secondly, the prosecutor was obligated to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that O.J. Simpson had committed two murders, beyond a reasonable doubt. Whereas, and of course, the jury acquitted, determining that they couldn't find beyond a reasonable doubt that O.J. Simpson had committed the murders. Then the victims brought a civil action for a wrongful death, essentially. Now, the standard there is different because the plaintiff only has to prove a case by a preponderance of the evidence. You just balance the scales. And in that case, the civil jury found that O.J. Simpson had, in effect, killed two people and found him, the term isn't guilty, but found him liable for wrongful death. Sometimes the public wonders about that divergence, but we've set up a very high barrier for the government to be able to put someone away. Is that a fair way of describing it?
What probably the most common quotation you hear on the subject is that our system is set up with the assumption that it is better that 100 guilty men go free than one innocent man be imprisoned. And everything is set up to make sure that when a jury comes back and says guilty, that person is guilty. And certainly this is a system populated by human beings, and human beings can make mistakes, and injustices can be done. But the assumption of the system that if there's going to be a mistake, we're going to make that mistake on the side of setting a guilty man free rather than imprisoning an innocent man.
And now you've sat as a criminal defense lawyer. You've also handled cases as a civil lawyer. You've been a prosecutor for a number of years and in charge of the DA's office in Polk County. Do you have a 20-second shot for me on how it feels to be heading towards the bench?
Many emotions. It's a little bit scary. It's something that's going to be new, a new challenge. I know how to do my current job. I've done about everything that I'm ever going to do as a DA, and it would be real secure to sit here to the rest of my career and do that. But this is a new challenge. I'm looking forward to it. I think I'll do a good job. I think I know how to be a judge. I think that I know how to be fair. And so on the whole, it's something I'm very much looking forward to. I will very much miss the job as Polk County DA. I can't imagine a job any better or more fulfilling than being the district attorney of Polk County. But it's one I've done for nearly 12 years, and as I say, I've met those challenges and I'm ready to move on.
On that very positive note, I thank you for joining us, and I thank our audience for joining us on the Kevin Mannix Report. We'll see you again next time.